Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to my Chinese Grand Prix preview. Now, it's just under a week since the Bahrain Grand Prix finished. What a race that was in the desert, and we are all hoping that F1 continues to deliver this weekend in Shanghai. First off though, and the FIA have said they are going to investigate the current wheel guns used in Formula 1 following a spate of unsafe releases. Now, last week in Bahrain, Kimi Raikkonen was released unsafely from the pits twice over the course of the weekend, the most costly of which was during the race, which saw a mechanic suffer a fracture of the tibia and fibula in a horrific incident to watch. And it's great news to see the mechanic has had successful surgery and is beginning recovery. It was also the third race in the last 4 seasons that the Finn has been forced to retire following an unsafe pit release. And as we all know by now, in Australia, both Haas cars were released with loose wheels, which saw both cars retire from the Grand Prix. And following these incidents, the FIA have decided to push ahead with an investigation, with Charlie Whiting saying, "It's looking like less and less like a coincidence, but the 2 incidences in Melbourne were quite clearly wheelgun operator error. They cross-threaded the nuts and thought it was tight, came off and then realised a little too late it wasn't. With the incident in Bahrain, the guy hadn't even taken the wheel off, which is slightly perplexing. Alonso lost a wheel in testing, if you remember. We went through it all with McLaren. They gave us a report in the week. We discussed it with the technical working group to understand it all, to make sure everybody else realises these things can happen. Everyone tries to learn from them." However, Haas team principal Gunter Steiner feels the FIA should be avoiding a knee-jerk reaction to the incident. He stated, "When it gets dangerous, it needs to be investigated. I'm not saying we should put people in danger, but how many years was it since we had the last injured man? We still know it's a dangerous sport. I feel sorry for the guy, and it shouldn't happen. But with our ones, the system which is there is safety. The wheel didn't come off. The system worked. So why would we change it? I wouldn't rush to a knee-jerk reaction after what happened. It was our fault in Australia. We paid the price for it, and we move on." I'm not going to jump back into the debate on this one. I've already had my say on the channel about it, but I am glad the FIA are at least going to have a look at these wheel guns and see if there's anything they can do to prevent this from happening. Following a very disappointing start to the season for Williams, Lance Stroll has said that everything needs work on the FW41. It was a miserable weekend in Bahrain. The team looks so far off the pace and look a long way off where they should be. Lance Stroll stated, "In Bahrain, it was shocking how much of a step backwards it was. I was 4/10 slower in qualifying than I was last year. We were losing time on the straights. We haven't improved. We improved a bit in the corners, but not even close to the extent we were hoping for." He has gone on to single out the handling and the straight line speed as the main areas the team need to be focusing on, but he has gone on to say that he feels the team need to be looking at improving most, if not all, of the car, and he also believes that right now Williams have the slowest car on the grid. The Canadian continued, "The handling is very challenging, but also a little bit inconsistent, because at times, like in Australia, I thought the car wasn't good, but it was much better than it was in Bahrain. The reason why, we are not sure, but definitely I experienced a much better balanced car in Australia, so that's positive to know. Here, we are using the same compounds as in Australia, so maybe there are some positives to look at." And in a separate interview, he said, "We currently have the slowest car and I am confident I have made the most of it. In the current situation, it's the best I could do. My consolation is to have beaten my teammate." As I said at the start there, Williams do look to be a long way off where they thought they'd be, of course, targeting at least 5th in the Constructors' Championship this year. That just does not look like it's going to happen. But as I've said multiple times before, I have no doubt whatsoever that Williams will improve as the season progresses, but I honestly cannot see anything coming before the upgrades arrive in Barcelona. On to today's press conference then, and one of the biggest talking points after the Bahrain Grand Prix was the incident between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. It has definitely divided the fan base. And the Dutchman was asked during the press conference how he had reflected on the incident. Verstappen said, "You can say whatever you like about the incident. I think I had a fair shot at it. It was nothing crazy, nothing risky. But yeah, unfortunately this time, it didn't work out. Looking back, for example, in Mexico last year, it did work out. This time, we gave each other maybe not enough space, but that's racing as well at the end of the day. Sometimes it's good, and sometimes it's bad." After the Bahrain Grand Prix, the press were desperate to make a story out of absolutely nothing, and they've tried again today by asking Max if he'd heard what Lewis had said after the race and if he would be talking with him about it this weekend, and even if the Dutchman would be changing his driving style going forward. To the latter, Verstappen initially just stated no and went on to say, "I might have a talk with him. It depends if it's really necessary, but why should I change something? I don't think I did anything wrong in terms of my approach. I was just trying to overtake a car. I think it was a fair chance. I went for it." Overall, it was a very disappointing race in Bahrain for Red Bull, who in practice at least showed very good race pace, and many tipped them to be in the fight for the victory. Verstappen was therefore naturally asked whether the team had analysed and solved the issues he and his teammate had in Bahrain. Max said, From my side, we put a new wheel on the car and new floor because that was destroyed. I think it was more from Daniel's car, of course. And in the race, I think we had the problem quite similar to me last year in Canada, and I think in testing this year as well. It's something that Renault needs to sort out. They are, of course, working really hard on that. I'm actually not too worried about it at the end of the day. If it happens, it happens. You can't prevent it. Pierre Gasly left Bahrain, rightly so, as driver of the day following his 4th place finish, and was asked in the press conference if last weekend's performance will be translated to the track in Shanghai. Gasly said, "I think definitely we understood much more about our car potential, car setup, about the tyres, but still we need confirmation. I think this weekend will be a good opportunity to judge our baseline and see if the potential is the same on other tracks." He was also asked if the team were confident ahead of this weekend's Grand Prix, to which he said, "We feel more confident than we were in Melbourne or for Bahrain. This is going to be my first time in Shanghai, so it's also going to be a new track for me. Will probably take a bit more time to adapt myself, but definitely we are a bit more confident. But still, we need to be careful. We know it's really tight in the midfield." Now, looking back to after the race, the Frenchman said over team radio, "We can fight," in what sounded like a response to Alonso's identical comments on his team radio in Australia. Now, Gasly was asked whether it was a reply to Fernando, to which Pierre said, "It was simple. It was just a little joke. That's it. I think we need to give credit back to Honda. In the end, they have had a tough 3 years with McLaren, and to finish P4 in a second race with them was just amazing. I must say, I had pretty tough messages after that by some Spanish people who are actually quite crazy. I have huge respect for Fernando, so I'm just making it clear. It was nothing related, just a high comment for Honda because I think they deserve the credit." Another man who had a fantastic weekend in Bahrain was Marcus Ericsson. He drove his Sauber to an impressive 9th place in the desert and was asked how he looked back at last weekend's results. Ericsson said, "It was a great race for us, great to be in the points, and also a great reward to everyone in the team. We're coming in from 2 very difficult years where we've been always at the back as a team, and then this year we're coming into the year with Alfa Romeo. It's been a lot of work to put in to make a step forward and to move up the grid, and to be already at the 2nd race of the year in the points, it's a great result." Bahrain was the 50th race since the Swede last scored points in Formula 1, and he was asked how relieved he was to finally end that run. I would imagine fairly relieved, the Swede saying, "It was a big relief. I think I've had 4 times P11 since then, so I was close a lot of times and had some great races, but it's very difficult when you're in the worst car on the grid. Some races I had a perfect race and finished P14 or something like that." That prompted a question as to how good this year's Sauber was versus last year, and Marcus said, "I think we have a very solid baseline to work from. Like Pierre said, the midfield is very, very close, and I feel that we are very much in that midfield, but probably in the lower part of that midfield at the moment. I'm just very happy that we are part of that group on pure speed. Now we need to work even harder to try to improve that position." As a whole, the press conference pretty much seemed to centre around Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton's incident last weekend, which definitely gave it a bit more of an interesting note than we had at the last driver's press conference. And it is great to see as well Pierre Gasly and Marcus Ericsson both getting the recognition they deserve for very good weekends in Bahrain. And finally, Daniel Ricciardo has said that he would have tried a last lap move on Sebastian Vettel in Bahrain. Valtteri Bottas, of course, was chasing down the German in the closing laps at last weekend's Grand Prix and finished just 0.7 seconds behind him. However, aside from, I guess you could say, a late-breaking look on the last lap, the Finn failed to make a full-on move for the lead. But the Aussie, famous of course for his ridiculously late-breaking moves, but brilliant to watch, says he would have 100% have attempted a move on the last lap. The Honey Badger said, "I definitely would have sent it. 100% I would have gone. There's a gap, you're finishing second anyway. If you overshoot, you are finishing second. Last lap for the win, you have to go. How the race would have gone? I don't know. I don't want to say I would have won, but if that was me on the last lap, you can bet everything that I was going for it." However, Valtteri Bottas says that he would not do anything different if the situation arose again, with the Finn saying, "I have reviewed everything, and if I could relive the situation again, I wouldn't do anything differently." Afterwards, and from the outside, it is easy to say, you should have done this, you should have done that. I think it's fair to say the Finn has taken quite a bit of flack over the lack of aggression he showed in Bahrain, and I still maintain that I think a more aggressive driver in that position, as Daniel Ricciardo has basically said there, would have gone for the move, and Bottas needs to show a bit more of an aggressive side. However, given what was a very difficult weekend in Australia for him, Bottas definitely bounced back well in Bahrain. So who do you think is going to win the 2018 Chinese Grand Prix then? And what are your podium predictions? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I will be back on Saturday with the qualifying report, and don't forget to join us for the race debrief live pretty much straight after the race on Sunday. In the meantime, though, you can follow me on social media. Links to Twitter, Facebook and Discord are all in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.